Hello and welcome to CAGI TechTV's inaugural production into AI and the problems that there actually are with it. It's inaugural, it's historic. This is the first time that we've put on a panel like this, and we're doing it with CAGI. CAGI, Mike, what's CAGI about?
Pete, yeah, thank you for that brief introduction. And CAGI is really all about ensuring that the world of AI is fit and safe for human consumption. What is the impact of artificial intelligence on cybersecurity, on quantum computing, and society at large? We're here to ask those big questions and talk it through with some experts in the field.
So it's incredibly appropriate that we've got this panel that we're about to actually get engaged with, because we're at this existential moment with AI where people are saying that this latest AI product from Anthropic, Mythos, shouldn't be released because it's potentially so dangerous in cybersecurity terms. Though, as our debate will show, not everybody sees it that way. Many people think it's a very optimistic moment. But anyway, let's get on with the debate. Hello and welcome to this Tech TV discussion panel on AI and cybersecurity. AI and technology is now absolutely mainstream, which is one of the reasons why Anthropic has suddenly decided that it was going to pull the release of some of its software because it wasn't behaving properly. Now, that sounds a little ridiculous. However, what it could mean is massive disruption to supply chains in the same way that we've seen that occurs when people start wars in other parts of the world. And in the studio here to talk about this, we have Mike Loginov, the former corporate CISO for the trillion-dollar NEOM project and founder of the Cybersecurity and AI Governance Initiative. We've got Kimmich, who's an open source security expert focusing on the gap between AI security regulation and real world implementation. We've got Sharon Gai, an AI speaker and author of How to Do More with Less Using AI. Neil Sahota, a United Nations AI advisor and a leading expert on how emerging AI systems will reshape global businesses' security and competitive advantage. And last but not least, Ramin, Farassat, the Chief Product Officer at Menlo Security, who's driving AI security-led innovation and delivering sustained enterprise growth. Now, the issue that we've all got to discuss is AI dangerous? What is the significance of Anthropic's announcement? And it's an announcement that has actually driven the UK Business Secretary, Liz Kendall, to actually send an open letter to businesses yesterday saying that this is something that they should all be learning to deal with. In our panel discussion, which is going to be led by Mike Loginov, we're going to look at these issues. So over to you, Mike.
Well, thank you, Peter, and it's a pleasure to meet you all here this evening, and looking forward to getting into a bit of debate around the topics that Peter's just outlined. I'd like to start really with a fairly pointed question, if I may, and to kick things off, I'm really looking for a yes/no answer from each of you. We can get into the detail later on, but I know how difficult it is for most of us to keep the answers short, so apologies for starting off with keeping it very pointed. And my question really is following on from what Pete's just outlined. Based on the recent disclosures regarding the zero-day vulnerabilities uncovered by Anthropic and its red team, Mythos, is the AI we're deploying today worth the risk? Is the AI we are deploying today worth the risk? And so it's a yes/no answer, and I'd like to perhaps start with Neil, and then I'll go to Sharon, Rami, and Sai. So Neil, yes or no?
Yes.
Sharon?
I thought you were going to ask the question a different way, but because of the way you asked it, yes.
Yeah, it's that way for a reason. Thank you, Sharon. Rami
Definitely, yes.
and Sal.
Strong yes.
Strong yes. So we have 4 yeses. So it's worth the risk. Deploying the AI is worth the risk. So I guess that leads me to my next question is, what risks are we consciously accepting as a result of that position? So maybe I could start with, well, anybody that wants to jump in on that particular one, feel free to jump in there. Neil, you want to go first?
Sure. When it comes to the risk, we have to think of the risk as uncertainty. There's both positive and negative. I know we talk a lot about the negatives, and there's security risks. There's the risks of errors, and those errors getting amplified. But at the same time, we don't think enough about the upside, right? There's a balance to this. At the end of the day, I mean, AI is a tool. And one thing that I've learned is that, look, bad actors are going to do bad things, but good actors need a nudge. It's one of the reasons we started the AI for Good initiative at the United Nations. And we have to create that kind of ecosystem because you think about, cyber attackers, they're going to leverage AI, but we don't actively think about how we could actually use it as a cyber defender. We need that nudge to actually do some of these things. So there's a lot of value that can be created from AI. And there's, a lot that we can do that's both good and bad, but this really, it boils down to more of a people thing because we're good at reactive thinking, but not proactive thinking. It's that uncertainty about how this might get used. We talk about a risk here that tends to freak people out. There's definitely a lot of irrational exuberance around AI, and there's a lot of fear mongering around AI, but there's this just very thin sliver of what we can actually do that's going to produce value. We don't focus enough on that. And I think if we can create the right mindset, right community, focus more on responsible AI and positive outcomes, I think we can actually achieve a lot, create a lot of good, a lot of benefits, and from a UN perspective, move the needle on the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
So, sorry, yeah, shoot. Is that Rami?
Yeah, Neil, I was going to just say that I totally agree with you. I talk to a lot of our customers, and of course, they're being pushed to increase productivity internally to the company, and they're using AI for doing that. We're a cybersecurity company, and a long time ago, we realized that we can't fight AI without AI. We have to use AI in our own technology to be able to battle the stuff that is coming out every day because the hackers are getting faster and faster, and they can scale much faster than they used to in the past. So the only way for us to be able to battle that is to use AI in our own technology. So for us, it's not something that we can stay away from. We have to use it in our technology.
Great. So has AI crossed the line now from a productivity tool into critical infrastructure? Are we looking at a whole new world?
I think I would say yes. I think with Mythos, and that's, I think, why this is being pushed out in a very, very different way. This is not coming out as a consumer model because it would be terrifying to provide a public API. Because every form of open sourced cybersecurity is a double-edged sword by design, right? And whenever you release information, you add to what has been now almost 45 years of computational arms race. This is unique, and this would create a tide flood of cybersecurity risks for people who are downstream in the system. We're talking critical systems, hospitals, banks, governments. We want to make sure that that's controlled. So what I think is the most interesting about this is not whether or not you should adopt AI to confront it or not. You must, by the nature of the threat model that you have in front of you. But really, where are we going to put our focus right now so that we make sure that this is a problem that is solved from the kernel onwards so that we can continue to have our banks and our hospitals functioning as normal?
Interesting. Thanks, Sai.
I'll just jump in there.
To
Oh
Sharon.
yeah,
Thank you,
to
Sharon.
me
It's gonna come
anyway.
to you, yeah.
I've always said that AI is sort of like fire, and when you introduce any type of general purpose technology that's very monumentally beneficial to society, there's always harm to it. I think the interesting thing with this one particularly is the public facing scrutiny that it's just gotten. I think that's quite unique. So each of these frontier model companies are constantly introducing and iterating on and releasing new models, but this one received a lot more scrutiny than the others. Perhaps because of the way that it was introduced. So, as we know, all of these frontier model companies are constantly red teaming before release, doing all sorts of tests with their partners before release. But for some reason, this one had a special task force associated with it and released these 40 or so partners. And it was done in such a way that not only got the scrutiny, but got the skepticism as well, where now you have all of these other folks on the World Wide Web, whether they are cybersecurity specialists or commentators saying that this is just a marketing ploy. And then it sort of sends this entire project into just a questionable stance. Like, are we, making too much of a big deal out of this? And going back to your first question, is it worth the risk to release? And is it actually going to be a very risky release? I think probably both. But I just wanted to share the interesting differentiation here with this particular one.
I just want to take a second to build on what Sharon's saying, because especially with Mythos, the goal was to take AI from an assistant to an operator. So it's going to do, multi-level decision making. It's going to take action and execute. And I think what we're seeing that's come out from Anthropic, that this is really an early warning signal, that there are risks that even the builders couldn't predict that came out from this. I mean, we're effectively, going from an AI intern to an AI manager. It has to deal with a lot of variation, unpredictability. If we don't know how it's going to behave or what decisions and actions it might take, that's going to cause obviously a lot of consternation.
And Neil, I'd like to add to that just really quickly. And this is not going to be the last. And just yesterday, by the way, and I'm sure all of you guys saw this thing, OpenAI announced OpenAI Spot. It's GPT-5 for Cyber. And here we go. Here's the next one that just came out. It's limited release. It's only to specific companies, but yet it's another tool that has similar capabilities. So it's not going to be the last one for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks, folks. I think you've all mentioned it. We're going for a kind of phased rollout here, limited rollout with a gated rollout. I think they've classed it as, where certain companies are getting early access to the Anthropic product. How have those organizations been selected? I think, Sharon, you mentioned there's about 40 or so organizations that are part of that initial rollout phase. How have they been selected? Because I'm very aware that most of them to me look like they're American organizations. I'm a Brit, as you can tell. So I'm just wondering, with the Americans getting in early, is there a competitive advantage there that the rest of the world is going to miss out on? Sal?
I mean,
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I'm happy to take this on.
Okay.
So
I'll come back to you, Sharon.
I think an important thing to understand is that whenever you look at things and say, oh, suddenly there's a bunch of American companies behind it, you have to know that there was 5 to 10 years of funding behind it. If you're seeing it publicly, this has been in place a long time. If you're sitting over the Linux kernel particularly, yeah, naturally, given the finances it's received over 25 years, it's going to be predispositioned towards the US marketplace. But I think we really should take a step back and consider the partnerships that they have chosen. They have not chosen to work with exclusively corporate partnerships. They've chosen to work with the corporate partnerships that are most likely to be close enough to the kernel and to the antitrust of the Linux Foundation to make security guarantees. They are also working specifically with the Linux Foundation and with FreeBSD to make sure that the most utilized kernels are protected before this goes public. And I think that is really important to see and observe. I think gated access and partnerships in this case This is going to give us an historical example of how to do what is now ecosystem security triage. And if they get it right, in a couple of months, we should all be able to rest a little bit easier, because this is definitely an upstream ecosystem problem and it requires an ecosystem solution.
Yeah, certainly something that impacts the whole world based on, where systems are today, for sure. So, Sharon, did you want to add anything to that response?
Yeah, I mean, I think just from a anytime you're working on anything, the first sort of your beta testers are always your friends and family. They're sort of the community closest to you. And I think for somebody like OpenAI, it would be great to pick more sort of global partners, so that everyone sort of has a shot at seeing if this is going to truly show the vulnerabilities they have in their legacy systems. But mostly a lot of American banks were chosen. And so, yeah, I think there is a bit of a bias there, but just from a proximity perspective. I think also the partners that were chosen also have a lot of vulnerable legacy systems, and they probably are going to be the ones most heavily impacted if this was to be released. And so hopefully when they chose the partners, they had the thought that they had in mind was, these were the most vulnerable group, and thus we picked this group. But maybe that was not what they thought when they picked the 40.
Great. Okay, thank you. I'd like to bring it back to cybersecurity in a moment. Before I get there, how do you see the AI LLM market playing out as we move into the future? We've seen consolidation of industries going back many, many years and decades. Will the same happen in the AI marketplace? Will we find the king of AI companies as we move forward? Will there be consolidation? The spend is clearly huge. How do we consolidate that into a single platform, or will it always be a case of multiple platforms? Any thoughts? Neil?
Interesting question, Mike. I mean, typically in any kind of business cycle, we do see a level of consolidation, and I think we will, just because of the compute costs. The challenge here, though, is that, because we don't code AI, we don't program it, we teach it. Even these foundational models are all a little different. I liken it that if you start a group of school children in the first grade together, if they have the same classes, same teachers, same lessons, they all grow up to be different people, right? Because of their experiences and the way they're taught at home. It's the same thing with AI. So there'll always be some kind of multifurcation, if that's even a word, around that. But I also liken it to the flip side in that we're already seeing developers start moving into edge computing, trying to reduce the amount of need for GPUs and compute time, compute power. Costs, electricity, even HVAC are driving these things. But what they're finding is by moving some of this into the hardware, you're improving not just the cost efficiencies, but speed, performance, and to some degree, security. And so it may be that LLMs might ultimately transform into devices, and it'll be more something like it'll be a form in maybe 10, 12 years that we don't even recognize today. So we just live in a rapidly changing time in the tech world. And so I never take it for granted that what exists today is how it's going to operate next decade.
Yeah, Neil, I'll add a little bit to that. I kind of agree with you about your first comment about the specializations of the large models. Right now it all looks like they're all competing with each other and they all have similar capabilities, but even there seems to be some specializations that are jumping up. You see what Cloud is putting a lot more focus on development, and a lot of the customers I talk to, they're using Cloud Code now for their development. And then you're seeing some of the other models are focusing more around their performance for automations and things like that. So I think that's probably what we're going to be seeing. I think they're all going to coexist, but some are going to be better in one and some are going to be better in others.
Okay, interesting times. Thank you, folks. So just bringing it back to the world of cybersecurity again, if I may. Being a former CISO, I'm obviously very concerned about defending an organization in the world of AI. So let me come to Sal again, if I may, with a question on incident response. Do you foresee a position where the AI provides an end-to-end solution, or will there always need to be a human in the loop?
Yeah, so unfortunately, and I did just come off a call where I had representatives from cloud and embedded. We're actually more worried with this threat model for embedded because those devices go out in the world, and now our supply chain attacks are to the what, a month, a week, a day that we're
Yeah.
getting exploits. So everywhere we are, we're going to see an onslaught and continuance of this type of model, whether or not it's Mythos or it's a competitor model or an adversarial model. These are going to come into place. So that moves us to having to do continuous defense. And when I say we, I really have to limit what I mean by that. There is no chance that you are going to be able to do continuous defense if you are downstream and providing a critical service. You have to continue to provide your service. What this changes is the communication and the time frame that we used to have before 0 days. So what Mythos does is it is unique in not being able to exploit known vulnerabilities. It's unique and it was developed to chain vulnerabilities together and to go back and look at previously known vulnerabilities and find new exploit routes. That's all it's designed to do. It's not a feature. So we're not going to treat it like it's a feature for consumers, right? Now, in that case, the open source ecosystems that we rely on, which have traditionally been the most secure, are the most exploited by this. And we do not any longer have the ability to have, and when we look at these 400 people that they've chosen as partners, that looks like your typical list for pre-0 day disclosure, so that your banks, your hospitals, and your critical infrastructure are secure when the 0 day comes out. So what does that mean naturally? Absolutely, there's going to have to be continuous patching. That responsibility has to be on those that were responsible in the 0 days beforehand, always. So I think we are in a really interesting place. It might look a little scary. I am really thrilled for what cybersecurity looks like in 2 years if we get this right.
If we get this right. Sharon, would you like to jump in on those keywords, if we get this right? What does getting it wrong look like?
Getting it wrong might be just mean the end of us. I
know
don't know
why I'm
for
smiling, but
I mean, it really goes both ways, right? So I just the other day I came out of a conference in China where some of the large language model companies there were coming together for an investor meeting, and they were talking about similar things. You know, in China, they're also talking about AGI. The goal is for these models to continue to advance, and one CEO from quite a prominent company actually stepped up and showed us this chart of, you know, the OpenAI sort of 5 stage pyramidic thing where level one was the chatbot, and then it was the reasoner, then it was the agents, then it's the help you invent, and then the autonomous organization. He thinks that we've already achieved level five, that it's already sort of unleashed and upon us. And a couple of, or right around that time was the announcement of Mythos. So I think those two events, you know, is probably not coincidence. I think also a lot of these LLM founders also are privy to information that we do not know, that the public does not know. They have a lot of models that sort of under the works that they have already seen results of that is not released in the public. I mean, this Mythos, it was just announced to us a week ago, but they had already known this probably for months or maybe years, as Sal said. So how can it go wrong? Yes. Can it go right? I think there's room for that too. It's, you know, AI is, because it's a general purpose technology, it's one of the wicked problems that we have, which is you know, problems that require a lot of different organizations and entities to work together to solve. And so even in this matter of Mythos being released and the way that they did it on a US side, on in this Oh, in a similar vein, in the China side, they can very much have some sort of a similar model and not do what we're doing right now, or maybe releasing it to Chinese society without privy of the U.S. knowing. So. I guess I didn't really answer your question of will it go right or wrong? It's sort of, for it's time will tell, I guess. But I think at the present, the more people that know about these vulnerabilities, the more people that know how dangerous these models can become, to not, just install OpenClaw on your local machine, simple things like that, the better that all of us will be. Except I think the unfortunate thing is because it's iterating at such a pace and because we're sort of in this race of productivity that my competitor, this guy just did it last night, so I'm just going to do it too without learning about the safer ways to deploy things and roll things out. I think that's our Achilles heel.
Yeah, interesting. And you mentioned China, you mentioned the US. Is AI, if we look at the threat generally, is it a national threat or is it more a threat to humanity as a whole? And if it is, how do we bring global communities together in order to ensure the safety of ourselves as humans, the organic aspect of things as opposed to the silicon aspect as we move forward into an unknown future, really? What controls do we need to put in place? Maybe come back to Ramin. Do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, I think, I look at it from the perspective of, our customers and the people that we're dealing with. We're dealing with international corporations. They have sites and offices all around the world in many different countries, China included, by the way, Sharon, and many other places, right? So we can't look at it as a localized problem. We got to look at it internationally and look at other potential issues as well. The data moving around between different countries through AI and potentially getting exposed easier than it used to in the past. It's not as easy as just trying to solve this thing from the perspective of, me in the US and someone else in the UK or someone in China. We do need to work globally. Are we doing that yet? Unfortunately, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're having this collaboration across different countries to try to address these. Hopefully, there would be more of that through collaborations.
Yeah,
I'll jump in on what Ramin's saying.
please do,
So
Neil.
one, I would frame this as not just AI as a threat, either nationally or internationally. It's also an opportunity. And the challenge that we have is that AI has become in some cases an advantage. In some cases, it's part of security, defense, military, and there are economic benefits and repercussions about pursuing AI. And so, from that standpoint, a lot of people are going to have national interests, just like we see the corporations with their own interests. There's, I think, an existential threat and opportunity here. I wouldn't say that there's not a whole lot of cooperation globally yet. I mean, that's one of the reasons the UN is trying to take the lead on this, especially with the AI for Good initiative. But what we're finding is a lot of our processes, the way we try to handle things is actually outdated. I mean, you think about the way we do regulations, for example. Something has to go wrong first before it's looked at, right? It's too late now, right? AI amplifies and does things so quickly that the impact is going to hurt or help millions, maybe tens of millions of people by the time we understand what's going on. And one of the things we actually talk about in the United Nations is the need to revamp how we do regulations. It just can't be policymakers and regulators at the table anymore. We need technologists, we need industry folks, we need academia, we need everybody to bring in different perspectives. And we have to think about not just the use that's built for, but the potential other uses and misuses. We have to be proactive thinkers, which I'll be blunt about it, as human beings, we suck at, right? We're really good with that immediate threat reacting to something, but the slow moving long-term things, we're not good about thinking that. And I see something I call the double deadlock, right? Because technologists built to an outcome. They expect like the business leaders to have thought through some of these things. And if they were worried about some of these things, would have communicated it. Whereas the business leaders think like, well, the technologists understand the capabilities and what might go wrong, so they're probably figuring that out in their design. On the flip side, the regulators expect the businesses to think through these things and take the safeguards, Well, the businesses are looking at the regulators, waiting for guidelines to figure out what they can do and not do. Total deadlock. And so because of that, we're kind of perpetuating our own, issues around the threats and hopefully some opportunities. But until we resolve some of these kind of people and procedural challenges, it's hard to move forward with responsible AI effectively.
Interesting.
I would just love to jump in for a second because I don't think it's as terribly doom and gloom as everyone thinks. Because the fact of the matter is, if you are using AI, I'm going to make a wild assumption and say you're only able to do that because you're functioning over a computer chip. Are we all agreed? Well, then great. In that case, we are dealing with a solution space with a limited combinatoric of problems and solutions. The reason why these models are so good at doing this right now is because it's a bounded space. We are quickly getting past a beautiful gap in cybersecurity vulnerability disclosure because of this. And on the other side of it, yeah, you're going to have to move towards automation. The systems that you use and you pull from, your hygiene and the supply chain is going to become paramount out of this. But if you get that right, your ability to trust the binaries that you consume to provide the services to regular citizens on the internet should become hygienic in a way that I did not know I would see in my entire career. I think that's a pretty good thing, and I do not think you should be afraid.
It's
That's an
worth the
interesting
risk,
one.
right, Sal?
Yeah, worth the risk.
Okay, so we've been speaking a lot about AI and the impacts generally. One quick question that springs to mind really is, if AI is doing such a great job at detecting AI and will presumably move on towards not only detecting but providing solutions to some of the problems that Anthropic, for example, have found, what's the need for a multi-billion-dollar cybersecurity industry moving forward? Sal, would you like to pick up on that one?
I'll take that as a first pass. Right
Mm.
now, it's really interesting. If you were a like federal consumer or a bank, anything that was going to be on the early side of the zero day, right now, that's becoming a more closed ecosystem that's trying to support what is now continuous discovery and fixing, because Mythos can do both. It can both find and exploit. It can also help you to patch. So everything we always do is going to be that cyber arms race. But what we need to ensure is that if you have a product that functions particularly over Python or Java or C or Kubernetes, that those ecosystems and the layers underneath them are where we address this incredible computational attention right now. If we do that before adversarials do, then all of the people that are consuming software beyond that are going to be living in a safer world. I think that's the only reason why we've got this really safe and slow disclosure model for this one thing while we have competitors coming out. It's because we're trying to replace the traditional zero day with continuous automation.
Okay, thank you for that great answer, Sal, and thank you to everybody else as well for your contributions today. It's been fantastic speaking to you all. This seems like a good point for me to hand back to Pete in the studio to just conclude, wrap up, and cover any questions he may have as well to close things out. Pete, over to you.
Well, thanks very much, there, Mike. What a fascinating conversation. I mean, I think one of the things is, let's try to bring this together. First of all, I'd like to go back to something that we were talking about right at the beginning, which is essentially, where is AI in our lives? What is the real question about the dependency of AI? You could almost call it a utility now that people have suddenly decided that they're going to take advantage of. Is that right? Is AI a tool, or is it part of our now absolutely essential infrastructure? Neil.
It's a good question, Pete, because I still liken it as a tool. We build solutions, but we've so interwoven it into our workflows, things that we normally do. So I'd still call it a tool within the process because AI itself has its own infrastructure. The hardware, the electricity, the HVAC, the data centers, it consumes lots of data. But I would still call it a tool. It's a central tool, as like email is to us, but a tool.
Okay, but is it? No, I mean, we're making a program about AI and education at the moment, and the way that people that we've been interviewing government ministers about this, and they've all been talking about AI as almost an essential component of life and one that you have to think about. It's not just deploying AI models in your classroom. They've been talking about having teachers learn ethics. They've been and that teachers will be in a sense. It was incredibly interesting that I've never heard Socrates mentioned so many times in things to do with technology. Sal, what do you think?
Well, I think when I get this discussion in AI, I just like to remind people that when the printing press first became popular, people demonized books because young people were spending all of their time in these pages and no longer in society, right? So it is a tool and it can be managed and used as a tool, but there's many different types of AI. There is a sincerely big difference in the ethics and the implementation of using it as the way that people are using it in 2026, typically, which is working with an LLM, or agentic, which is when you implement agentic models inside of a business structure. That is what we traditionally would have viewed as, if you look at that threat model, you just said you just created an artificial agent to act as an inside actor inside of your system. We can do our best to put guardrails around that, and we're building out how to do that right now. But you have to have guardrails at the kernel level because it might drop down and you can't see and observe that, and all the way up to make sure that you don't have any human rights violations if it tries to go outside of what it is ethically constrained to do. That's incredibly important. But I think that any discussion around ethics will fail if people do not continue to communicate that these are systems that were built by people and will be changed by people. The ethics must be implemented. The guardrails have to be concentrated and confirmed. And in security, this is not a philosophical discussion. We will leave out Socrates. We will bring in secure primitives. I must be able to mathematically prove that every brick that I've put into this system cannot be broken. And that is the world that we are moving into. When I say that I am so pleased and excited by this, I couldn't have a discussion with the entire ecosystem of Python about making sure that they had secure primitives in place 5 years ago. Now, it's something that they will come to me for.
Yeah,
Okay,
Sal,
but I
I
mean,
can agree more. Sorry,
yeah.
Peter,
So
just
you go for it,
very quick.
Ramin. Go
Yeah,
for it.
yeah. Very quickly, what Sal said actually really resonated to me. We have a phrase that we use that we say the next billion users are going to be AI agents. And there's a reason we're saying that, right? Because they're becoming autonomous. They're actually doing the job of what humans have been doing, and being proactive and putting in those guardrails is a must. It's no longer something that we could just ignore. It's becoming more and more important that we put in the right perimeters, that we really look and see how this technologies are being deployed and implemented.
Yeah, but that's going to be the fascinating thing, isn't it? Because where perimeters in with those billion agentic data points or whatever you want to call them, where are your perimeters going to be? Where are they? Are they within your organization? Where do they sit?
I'll answer this question because it's great. So for years, we've always wanted to be able to have regulation actually confirmed down to what happened in the computer at the time that it happened. And all of a sudden, that's the threat model that we're required to respond to with agents. So yes, you have an interesting ability to use agents in a way that's extremely hygienic if you not only limit it to the guardrails and time and space and what it's supposed to be executing, but also importantly, in a way that I've never seen in security before, the element of time. Once the agent executes what it is that it is supposed to execute, it is ephemeral and it must dissolve. That is the only way to ensure that you don't have, in Java, you would call this a God class. When someone stays at a company too long and they gradually gain permissions into a code base, they get God class and they can execute. You don't want anything to be able to have that if it's autonomous or human. And so the controls that we're able to put in place around agentic, and this is happening particularly in banks, is a threat model that actually improves our ability to deal with the traditional threats in that space, which were human.
Okay, but Sharon, you mentioned fire. I mean, just listening to Sal there, I'm thinking about Prometheus. I'm thinking about the god who, who escaped and brought out fire, and it got out of control. I mean, this whole thing about guardrails is essential, isn't it? But how do we do that?
Yeah, funny you bring up Prometheus, because he was later then, I think he was strung on a rock, and Zeus sent an eagle to peck out his liver every single day. And he was very much punished for bringing fire, I think, to humanities or humans, which seemed like a very useful tool for them. Um, we will see who our quote unquote Prometheus is and who we will string on a rock when something goes wrong. But I think the big uh, I think going back to my earlier point about the big empty space that I really see is basic education for actually not these, 40 partners that were selected. These are or even folks in the tech industry. I think it's the absence in basic AI education for those who are non-technical and not part of this industry. I think these are folks that are probably going to not just be most impacted when actual things like Mythos eventually gets approved and then released and then starts heavily impacting society. These are folks that, I think for them will probably will feel like it came out of left field because, we are in this Zoom room talking about this topic, and it's sort of every day for us. But for some other people, not just in the U.S. but everywhere around the world. I mean, the other day I think I saw this chart of if every dot was 100 million people, there were many, many dots. I don't know if the couple of us have seen that same image. And there was a gigantic swath of people who have never even touched a chatbot yet. And then of the people who have, which was around maybe a third of this chart, there were, I think, this one thin line of folks that have paid to use an AI chatbot of some sort. And then of that, there's even a smaller percentage of people who are grading and using AI as critical infrastructure. So I think we often forget about that large chunk on top, and that's a group of people that's heavily impacted by the little tiny bits here at the bottom, who are the people that are actually touching these models every day and training them. And so I think seeing that, it really put things in perspective. And I wish more people had that perspective. Everyone that's sort of on that top chunk and the bottom.
There's one question that a couple of years ago I was in Panama at the Beneficial AGI conference, and David Brin, the science fiction writer, was there, and he was making the point, and this is going to something that Sal was saying about being able to keep humans in the loop, or whether you could do. Brin was saying that actually the thing that's going to end up regulating AI are these super predators called lawyers. He and at some point there has to be some liability in all of this, and if you are going to follow through liability in the chain, then you're going to be looking for a person, because you can't sue a system. You can only sue the person who originated or gave permission for the system to be in place. Neil, what's your take on that?
It's interesting you bring it up, Pete, because I actually have done consulting work for several of the biggest law firms. And they see this as a fantastic opportunity, especially as they reposition themselves as risk management advisors. So they're actively, trying to figure out liability. That's how they draw some of their business. But one of the things that they struggle with, and I think a lot of people struggle with in general, is not realizing these business models and the way we actually, conduct work is going to change. So you think about autonomous vehicles, for example, right? If you have one, it gets into an accident, who's responsible? They're like, is it the owner of the vehicle? Is it the guys that created the autonomous system? It's like, you're not thinking in the future, people won't own cars, right? That's actually the direction we're moving into. Real estate developers are already starting to design houses without garages and driveways. So if people don't own cars, what happens? You're probably looking at the manufacturer now as a source of liability. And this is, I hate to say it this way, too much of a big change for a lot of people. It's a multi-level ripple effect going on that, for whatever reason, we tend to think like if one thing changes over here, nothing else is going to change with it. And we know that's not happening. And that's really going to be the ultimate struggle. Lawyers, predatory things, dictate things reactively, yes. But what we really have to get good at again is that proactive thinking. There are more and more people, especially in the regulatory community. I actually spoke at the Regulator Summit last summer, is that we need to figure out and anticipate the other uses, misuses of the technology. And that really starts with people. And I hate to use this example, and it's a horrifying example. I'm going to warn everyone right now. But a couple of years ago, there was a guy in Canada that was taking images and videos of real children off social media and using deep fake technology to create pornography, child pornography. And it was a total freak out, right? Thankfully, the guy, pled guilty and stuff like that. But I remember I was in the room in the UN leadership meeting, and the head of UNICEF is there, and she's asking me, Neil, oh my God, we have 10,000 pictures of children on our website. Is this a risk? And it's like, yes, right? That's because of people. AI doesn't understand what it's doing. The bigger thing though is that she's asking, like, how come you guys didn't think about this? And it's like, this is not a use case we'd never envisioned, right? None of us would ever think about doing this to a child, or even let alone another human being. That's the biggest thing, is how do you think like a bad actor? How do you think about what's going to go wrong? We're really good about building to outcomes. We think more sunny side than rainy day. This is the mindset we actually have to get into to address some of these challenges. It's a
Okay, well,
huge.
let's just hold it there just a moment. Ramin, how about that then? Should you have an AI that actually contrives to be a bad person? Should you have an AI that is actually set up to be the bad thing? Because that's the last thing in the world that you want to have escape, isn't it?
It's something
I
we have
think
actually. Sorry, it's something we've actually thought about doing. The problem is how do we train it, right? You need the domain expertise.
yeah. Yeah, that said, Neil, I think we're kind of, going back in the circle of where we started this discussion. Why we started this discussion is to talk about the project Glasswing, right? Anthropic and what they have come up with. What is it doing? It's doing exactly that, right? It's looking for vulnerabilities. So in fact, it is acting as the malicious person. Now, on the other hand, it's also helping us find those vulnerabilities so we can go fix them. So yes, we do need to think that way, Peter, and try to figure out what is it that we can do to actually identify those vulnerabilities and those potential issues, and use AI for doing that, but then also use AI to be able to go and address them.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to call it a day there because we've gone over, but it's been absolutely fascinating. It's been a lot of fun, actually. Um, so thank you all very, very, very much. And it's thank you for the contribution. It's been wonderful. I mean, one of the most optimistic things I think that I've heard from all of this is that in those early heady days of AI, when a lot of people were talking about going out and consulting all sectors of the community and that we should get input from so many different places, then there was a sense that this was being abandoned. A year or so ago, we got the feeling where at the end of the Munich Security Summit, JD Vance said, no, get rid of all regulation. But now this is actually optimistic, that people are actually saying, hey, let's have some guardrails. Let's have a slow rollout. Let's all think about this because we could do something that's potentially very dangerous.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true.